Greetings from First United Methodist Church of Los Alamos, New Mexico. We hope this message will be meaningful and relevant to your life and your relationship with God. We invite you to join us for worship on Sunday mornings. We have now resumed in-person worship with one service at 10 a.m., which is live streamed both on Facebook and on YouTube. We alternate each week between contemporary and traditional music. You may confirm worship times and receive more information by visiting our website, firstinyourheart.org. Now may you be blessed through the reading and hearing of God's holy word.
Reading comes from the first letter of John. In this short letter, John has been writing that we are to live in Christ and live in love because God is love and God first loved us. He then turns to his conclusion. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the parent loves the child. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. For the love of God is this, that we obey his commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome, for whatever is born of God conquers the world. And this is the victory that conquers the world, our faith. Who is it that conquers the world but the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? This is the one who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ, not with the water only, but with the water and the blood. And the Spirit is the one that testifies, for the Spirit is the truth. Our gospel reading comes from the 15th chapter of John. This is part of what is known as the farewell discourse, in which Jesus gives his final teachings to the disciples. Immediately before the passage we are about to hear, Jesus has said that he is the vine and we are the branches. Just as branches must abide in the vine to bear fruit, so too must we abide in Christ, for apart from him we can do nothing. Jesus said, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commands so that you may love one another. This is the good news of Jesus Christ.
Thanks be to God. Sports fans in Philadelphia are known to be particularly passionate about their sports teams, and their passion sometimes leads to downright hostility, directed not just at the opposing players and fans, but sometimes even their own players and things their teams are doing. They might most famously be known for throwing snowballs and booing at Santa Claus. Who boos at Santa Claus? People who want coal in their stockings are those who boo at Santa Claus. Now, this hostility that the Philadelphia fans are known for stands in contrast to the nickname for the city, which is the city of brotherly love. And that nickname actually has nothing to do whatsoever with who the people are. No offense to anybody who's from Philadelphia. Love your sandwiches. But Philadelphia literally means brotherly love. So that's where their nickname is coming from. Now, some of you may remember, we've talked about this before, that there are 4 words in Greek that get translated into English as love. One is the word eros, which is the passionate physical love. That word actually never appears in the New Testament. A much rarer word is storge, which is the feeling that families have for one another. We might call familial love. Then there is philia, which is where Philadelphia is coming from. Philia is brotherly love, that category not being blood brothers, but those we consider friends, right? Love for your BFF, so to speak, and we would also include that to be sisters, right? Those who are beyond blood ties, that what we might consider family, those that we have that relationship for. And then there is agape, which is the most common one we find in the New Testament. It's a word to use to describe God's love for us. And this agape, all of these are not really about feelings such as about how we live out. This agape has a sacrificial meaning to it as well, of servanthood, giving of yourself for others. And so sometimes this word agape is also used to describe a parent's love for a child, right? Somebody that you're going to give yourself, even possibly including giving your life for, to love. So it's of giving yourself for other people. And so as we conclude this series then on the gospel in Star Wars by looking at the film Rogue One, I want you to keep those understandings of philia and agape in mind as we look at, because they become important from that gospel passage we just heard. So Rogue One was released in 2016. It's the first of the standalone full action feature films of the Star Wars movie, sometimes referred to as the unnumbered films. That is, it doesn't have a number because it's not part of a trilogy. Rogue One takes place immediately before the original Star Wars film, the couple of weeks before that film begins, and thus brings us back full circle to where we started in this series. And the main storyline tells us about Jyn Erso, who is the daughter of Galen Erso, who is the engineer who designs the Death Star. As a young girl, Jyn witnesses her father basically being kidnapped by the Empire, who also kill her mother. Then she's rescued by Saw Gerrera, who's a militant rebel leader. And then rather than resisting the Empire, Galen decides that he's going to go ahead and follow their plans to design this Death Star. But he designs a flaw into it so that with one shot, the whole thing can be blown up, which sort of explains the end of the original Star Wars film. But Galen gets an Imperial shuttle pilot to defect, to take a message to Jyn to let her know that it's almost operational and this is how you bring it down. Jyn is then captured by the Rebel Alliance so she can help to get this message for them so they will know what's happened. And in doing that, the pilot goes to the planet of Jedha, or the city of Jedha, which is where kyber crystals are mined. Kyber crystals not only power Jedi's lightsabers, but they are also what's used to power the Death Star to make it a planet-killing device. So Jyn travels to Jedha along with Cassian, another rebel leader, who were shown sort of early as willing to do whatever it takes in order to fight for the cause of the rebellion, along with K2SO, who's a reprogrammed Imperial droid. And when they get to Jedha, they encounter a blind seer, Chirrut Imwe, who is probably one of the coolest Force users we find in any of the series, who has a personal mantra, a breath prayer, says, "I am one with the Force and the Force is with me." You should try that as your own. And we're told that Chirrut is a guardian of the Whills, which is actually a flashback. That was what Lucas had originally called the Force, was the people who were using the Force were the guardians of the Whill. And he has a companion named Baze who helps protect him. But one of the things we learn about Jyn early on is she sort of sees herself as a force in and of herself, that she has no attachments to anybody else. She cannot trust anybody else. She thinks, really, that's what she wants to say, is she only thinks about herself, right? She's in it for herself, and whatever she can get, and nothing else matters because she can't trust, right? She's had all these events happen throughout her life that she can't trust them. And so we get an early indication, though, of who she truly is when she and Cassian are caught in a firefight between the Empire and Saw Gerrera's rebels. So we have some, in the in-house, the sound is not picking up the speaking voices. It's not as important. The words will be up there. It's not as important as about what she does. So if you'll play that video. So Jin risks her life to save a child that she sees out in the streets. Now, there are definitely people we say that we would risk our lives for, right? Children, spouse, partner, parents, siblings, people who are really close to us. But would we be willing to risk our life or to take some sacrificial activity on our parts to help total strangers? In this day and age, that's not really just a hypothetical because of some of the things we've just come through, that there are sometimes we have to make personal sacrifices in order to protect other people, the lives of others. And so Jin takes this step out, even though Cassian says, don't do it, right? Jin, no. She risks her life, and actually what happens and changes the directory of what's happening there, in order to run out and protect this child who's greatly at risk. And this takes us back to that Greek then, from the passage. Jesus says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends." And so the word for friends here is philos, which comes out of that Greek word for love, philia, the love for others, brothers and sisters. And again, this love is about action, not just a feeling we have for people, but about what we do. And it becomes apparent as we understand the context in which Jesus gives this passage, as Opal Lee said, as part of what is known as a farewell discourse, the final instruction that Jesus is giving to the disciples on his last night. And that last night in the Gospel of John does not surround the institution of communion. That happens earlier in John. So in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, then the last night, right, is communion service. But in John, it's not about communion. It's about the washing of feet. Of Jesus taking on this role of a servant in order to serve others. And so that context of you love one another in that sense of philia, right, for your philos, your friends, is that sense of serving them. And there's no greater love, philia, of this than to give up your life. So the role of servant that Jesus takes on then with the disciples plays out as we have to understand what he's saying in this passage. That this call to love is never self-centered. It's always about the other. And we see in the Star Wars films that actually the Force is the same way. Other than Chirrut's breath prayer, all other references to the Force are blessings will say, the Force be with you. Occasionally say the Force will be with us, right? It's not self-referential, it's about other people, about this bigger group. And even Chirrut's statement that the Force is with me and I am one with the Force is sort of, I said, it's like the 23rd Psalm, right? We say, you are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That doesn't mean that we own God, right? It's talking about how God is active in our lives. And it becomes this universal then because we can pray that psalm in its multitudes. And all of us saying, God is with me, and God is with you, God is with us. And so the same thing happens in the Force. And so we understand this is how God's love works, that God's love is out there for everybody, that God is abiding in us already, and we are called to abide in God. That God's love is outward directed, because that's what a vine does, right? Just before this, Jesus says, I am the vine, and you are the branches, right? The vine gives and produces out to the branches so the branches can produce the fruit. And so God's love is outward directed so that we can produce the fruit. And God's love is so outward directed that God didn't even withhold God's own Son, that sacrificial agape giving. God does not withhold the Son, as we hear numerous times in Scripture, especially in the Gospel of John and in John's letters. So how do we know of God's love? Because of that sacrifice that Jesus gives, of laying down his own life for his friends, for his brothers and sisters, in order to bring healing and wholeness to the world, in order to be love, agape love, and philia love. So Jesus says, give of yourself for others. That's what love looks like. You'll be known as my disciples by what you give, by how you live. And that message stands in almost total opposition to the individualism that our culture propones and says, this is who you should be. Think about yourself. But Jesus says, no, we are part of a bigger plant, right? I am the vine and you are the branches. We're all connected and woven into each other. Which is what Jin really comes to understand, as do some of the other rebel leaders. After they find out where Jin's father is located, they go to find him. Jin, with the hope of reuniting with him, because she hasn't seen him since she was a child. But Cassian actually has orders to kill him. And so after Cassian leaves the ship, Chirrut, remembering he's blind, asks if Cassian has the face of a killer, having sensed within the Force what's about to happen. And Baze, his collaborator, says, no, he has the face of a friend. There's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. But the Empire ends up killing her father, so they set off to Scarif to find the plans for the Death Star, which are held there. The rebels face a mighty battle against heavy odds with the Empire protecting this planet. They suffer major losses, sacrifices for the message of hope, which is what we're told. The rebellions are built upon hope, which we should have known because the original Star Wars was renamed A New Hope. But the Death Star and Vader arrive on the scene, but not before Jin and Cassian are able to get the plans out. So take a look. And so for those who haven't seen the film, the plans are given to Princess Leia just after that, which then again sets us up for the original Star Wars. But Jin sacrificially gives her life for the rebellion to bring hope. Does that remind you of anyone? Jin is a Christ figure. You can say the same thing about Cassian. It's a common motif in literature and film. There's no greater love than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. To make a sacrifice through love and because of love. But that sacrifice need not necessarily be losing your life. There's lots of ways that we can make sacrifices for other people. Perhaps you're at the grocery store and you see a mother or a father struggling with their young kids, awaiting a long checkout line. Letting them go ahead of you so they're one step closer to getting out of the store and less screaming for you, right, is a sacrifice you can make on their behalf. Giving up your parking space, that great one you just found, to somebody else can be a sacrifice. Giving your umbrella to somebody else who doesn't have one when it's raining, right? Volunteering your time, all these can be sacrificial activities. And I know that we could think of more. And then there are sometimes those things that get put before us, sacrifices that we might have to make that can change our lives, the direction of our life. So in another church, I had a member come to me, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and he found out that there had been a contamination at one of their manufacturing plants, and the company was trying to cover it up. And so he came to me really to sort of talk through. He knew what he needed to do, but he wanted to talk through the ramifications of that. Because he said, if I become a whistleblower, and there was actually just a study that came out a couple months ago on whistleblowers, and it tends not to have positive things that happen for people who do a vital and important role in society. He said, if I become a whistleblower, I'm going to lose my job, and more than likely, I'll be blackballed in the industry. I'll never be able to work in pharmaceuticals again. And he said, I'm of an age where just getting a new job is going to be hard, let alone trying to find a new occupation. So do you do the right thing, or you do the thing that's best for you and definitely best for his family, right? Keeping an income coming in of employment. Do you do what's right, consequences be damned? Or do you do what's right for those that you love? And I don't ask that question flippantly, because those are genuinely hard things that happen in our lives. And if the answer was easy, if loving was easy, everyone would do it. Jesus says the pathway of discipleship is hard and narrow, right? The way that leads to destruction is wide and easy. If this was an easy thing to do, everyone would do it to live in love. So the question is when we call to love others, are we going to do the hard things, the sacrificial things of saying that the we is more important than the me? That I might be willing to do things that are harmful to me in the short term, maybe the long term, maybe even costing my life in order to do the right thing for others, in order to love other people. To give that same love that God has given to us, that sacrificial love. And so the Star Wars films are filled with lots of examples of people making sacrifices for others, sometimes the ultimate sacrifice, and sometimes just making sacrifices of their life, of their time, of their talents to serve something greater than themselves, to serve their fellow brothers and sisters. And we're called to give of ourselves, not to earn God's love, because God has already given us God's love. That's why we're called to love, is because we've already received. We're called to abide in God's love because God already abides in us. So Jesus says, this is my commandment. And notice he doesn't say, this is my recommendation. This is a suggestion for you, whether you want to do it or not. Jesus says, this is my commandment, that you will love one another as I have loved you. And there's no greater love than this, to lay down your lives for your friends. That doesn't always mean, or necessarily mean, right, being killed for them, but about laying down our own preferences of making sacrificial actions to help other people. Because as Jesus says, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who will save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. I pray that it will be so, my brothers and sisters. Amen. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to follow our YouTube channel and Twitter, and like us on Facebook if you haven't already. And remember that every action you take today could change someone's life. So make sure it's a good one and be an agent of love. God bless.